The widow accepted a skew whiff house as payment from her patroness, but the reason it was crooked changed her life. Eliza O'Connell was a widow with 6 children who were starving. Her millionaire patroness offered an old, skew-whiff house that no one wanted as payment. A house so tilted it looked ready to fall, that everyone said was cursed. But when she discovered why it was so twisted when she opened the bolted room that caused the whole structure to lean to one side, she realized she had just received much more than a roof over their heads, and now she would have to defend with her life what that generosity had given her. The day Eliza O'Connell saw her husband Darren collapse in the middle of his carpentry workshop, hand clutched against his chest and eyes wide with pain, she knew her life had just shattered. There was no time for goodbyes, no final words, just the dull thud of his body against the concrete floor, her choked scream, and then the deathly silence that settled in their home like a permanent ghost. Darren was 42, Eliza 38, with 6 mouths to feed. Liam, 14. The twins Jed and Finn, 11. Ruby, 9. Little Pip, 7. And baby Oscar, barely 2 years old. The first few months were a descent into hell. The workshop closed, debts mounted. Creditors hammered on the door, demanding payments Eliza couldn't meet. She sold Darren's tools, the few good pieces of furniture they owned, even her wedding ring, but nothing was enough. Wagga Wagga, the regional town where she had lived all her life, suddenly felt cold and hostile. Old friends looked at her with pity, or worse, barely disguised scorn. Poor Eliza, they muttered at the local shops. How's she gonna keep those 6 kids fed on her own? One October afternoon, with an empty stomach and the children crying from hunger at home, Eliza walked to Kingsley Downs, the immense rural property belonging to Dame Eleanor Kingsley, a millionaire known across the region for her fortune and difficult disposition. They said she was also a widow, though that was more than 20 years ago. They said she was hard as nails and cold as ice, but they also said she paid well. Eliza knocked on the service door with trembling hands. An older woman with a severe face opened it, looking her up and down with suspicion. "What do you want?" "I came to ask if you need help," Eliza said, swallowing her pride like ground glass. "I can clean, cook, whatever is needed. I have 6 children and—" "Wait here," the woman interrupted, shutting the door in her face. Eliza waited under the harsh sun, feeling the sweat run down her back and shame burn her cheeks. Almost an hour later, the door opened again. This time it was another person, a tall woman in her 60s, dressed with simple elegance, silver hair pulled back in an impeccable bun. Her eyes were gray and penetrating, as if they could read every secret Eliza tried to hide. "You're Darren O'Connell's widow," she said, not as a question. "Yes, Dame Eleanor. How many children do you have?" "6, ma'am." "And how old is the youngest?" "2, ma'am." Dame Eleanor observed her in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Then she nodded slightly. "I need someone to clean, cook, look after the main homestead. The work is hard, the hours are long. I won't tolerate laziness or excuses. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am," Eliza replied without hesitation, though she had no idea how she would manage with Oscar. "I can handle anything. The pay is fair. You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Don't be late." And that was it. Dame Eleanor closed the door, and Eliza almost ran home, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. That night, for the first time in months, she managed to buy bread and milk for her children. She watched them eat with a mix of relief and sadness that choked her throat. But back in town, tongues wasted no time in wagging. Eliza O'Connell, the respectable widow, was now working as a housekeeper for the millionaire. "The shame! What a fall!" Shazza from the RSL and her friends muttered at the shops, in the pub, on every corner. "She's got no dignity, Shazza, the biggest gossip in Wagga," declared. "I'd rather starve than stoop that low." Eliza heard the comments and clenched her fists, but she didn't respond. She couldn't afford to. Her children needed to eat. The first few days at the homestead were exhausting. Eliza arrived while it was still dark, leaving Liam in charge of his siblings, and didn't return until the sun had set. The main house was enormous, 3 stories, over 20 rooms, marble floors that needed scrubbing on her knees, massive windows that required hours of cleaning. And Dame Eleanor was demanding, yes, but not cruel. She watched Eliza work with those grey, inscrutable eyes, but never yelled or insulted her, as Eliza had feared. In fact, there was something strange about the way Dame Eleanor treated her. Sometimes, when Eliza was cleaning the library, she felt the millionaire's gaze on her. Other times, Dame Eleanor asked unexpected questions. "Is your eldest son still at school? Is the baby healthy? What did your husband study?" Eliza answered respectfully but honestly, and slowly, something began to shift. Dame Eleanor started giving her clothes she no longer wore. Old toys from her son for Oscar, books for Liam, small gestures. Eliza received with immense gratitude. One November afternoon, while Eliza was sweeping the upstairs corridor, she heard loud voices coming from Dame Eleanor's study. It was her nephew and niece, Brendan and Chloe Kingsley, who visited the homestead every month with the excuse of checking on their aunt, but who really just wanted to ensure their inheritance was intact. "Aunt, it's ridiculous living alone in this huge house with only one housekeeper," Brendan said with a sickly sweet voice. "You should come live with us in Sydney. We can look after you better." "I don't need looking after," Dame Eleanor replied, her voice dry as the outback. "And certainly not by you two, who are just waiting for me to drop off so you can carve up what I have left." The silence that followed was tense and icy. Eliza stood paralyzed with the broom in her hands, not daring to move. Then she heard the furious footsteps of the relatives going down the stairs, their poisoned whispers. "Stubborn old woman. We'll see who gets the last laugh." That night, as Eliza finished cleaning the kitchen, Dame Eleanor entered with a glass of water, sat at the table, something she never did, and watched her in silence for a long time. "Eliza," she finally said, "what would you do if you had a lot of money and no children of your own?" The question caught her off guard. Eliza put the cloth on the sink and turned to her patroness. "I don't know, ma'am. I suppose I'd make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands." Dame Eleanor smiled for the first time. It wasn't a warm smile, but rather a sad, tired one. "You're smarter than you look," she murmured. Eliza didn't know how to respond to that, but the conversation stayed with her for days. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Dame Eleanor asked her to accompany her to inspect a property she owned on the outskirts of Wagga, near the highway to the Gold Coast. Eliza left her children with a neighbor and got into the millionaire's Land Cruiser, nervous and confused. They arrived at a large, overgrown block of land, where an old wooden and weatherboard house stood. But the strangest thing about the house was that it was completely tilted to one side, as if a giant hand had pushed it. The walls curved at impossible angles. The roof looked ready to collapse. The windows were broken. "This is my old shack," Dame Eleanor said as they walked around the structure. "My grandfather built it almost 100 years ago, but it's been abandoned for decades. No one wants it. They say it's haunted." Eliza looked at the house with curiosity more than fear. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did notice something odd. The tilt wasn't uniform. It was as if something very heavy was pulling the house toward a specific side. "Why is it so skew-with, ma'am?" Dame Eleanor looked at her with those penetrating gray eyes. And for a moment, Eliza thought she would get an answer. But the millionaire only smiled again with that mysterious, tired look. "That, my dear Eliza, is a secret only I know." They returned to the homestead in silence, but Eliza couldn't stop thinking about the skew-with house and Dame Eleanor's words. Something was hidden there, something important, and without knowing why, she felt that this secret was about to change her life forever. The answer would arrive much sooner than she imagined, and in a way she never could have predicted, because 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Dame Eleanor's son would arrive from Melbourne with his wife and young son, and that 5-year-old boy, Leo, mischievous and curious, would get too close to the edge of the artificial billabong in the homestead gardens. And when he fell into the water, screaming and flailing desperately, it would be Eliza who was nearby. It would be Eliza who would have to make the most important decision of her life in a fraction of a second. Tuesday dawned with a suffocating heat that promised a storm. Eliza arrived at the homestead at 6 on the dot as usual, but found the house in an unusual state of agitation. Dame Eleanor was in the kitchen giving orders to the other staff, a young woman named Jess, who helped with food prep. "My son is coming today from Melbourne," Dame Eleanor announced, without looking up from the list she was writing. "He's bringing his wife, Tara, and my grandson, Leo. I want everything to be spotless. The main second-floor suite must shine. New sheets, clean towels, fresh flowers in the bathroom." Eliza nodded and immediately got to work. She had heard of Dame Eleanor's son, Julian Kingsley, but had never met him. According to Jess, he was a successful engineer, too busy with his business and city life to visit his mother often. "Dame Eleanor gets jumpy when he comes," Jess confided, while they prepared the room. "I think it hurts her that he visits so rarely. He just comes out of obligation, you know. Not like us, who are here every day." Eliza didn't reply, but she stored that information in her heart. She knew that kind of pain, the pain of loving someone who doesn't return that intensity. Julian and his family arrived around 3 in the afternoon, in a black BMW Ute that kicked up a cloud of dust as it drove down the gravel driveway. Eliza saw them from the second-floor window, a man in his mid-30s, tall and good-looking, dressed in expensive but casual clothes, his wife, a slender woman with dyed blonde hair and huge sunglasses, and the boy, Leo, a 5-year-old with dark, curly hair who jumped out of the car before it stopped completely. "Leo, stop!" Tara shouted, her voice shrill and annoyed. "You'll hurt yourself!" But the boy was already running toward the house, laughing and yelling as if the whole world was his playground. Dame Eleanor came out to greet them with a strained smile. Eliza descended the stairs discreetly not to be in the way, but Dame Eleanor called out, "Eliza, come here. I want you to meet my family." Eliza approached, hands clasped over her apron, feeling Julian and Tara's assessing stares. "This is Eliza O'Connell," Dame Eleanor said with a tone that Eliza thought sounded almost proud. "She's worked with me for 2 months. She's an exceptional woman. Pleased to meet you," Eliza murmured with a slight nod. Julian returned the greeting politely, but Tara barely looked at her before turning to her mother-in-law. "Mum, Eleanor, it's sweltering. Don't you have air conditioning in this house?" "The air conditioning is in the bedrooms," Dame Eleanor replied with forced patience. "Eliza will show you where you can freshen up." As she carried the visitors' luggage upstairs, Eliza heard Leo running everywhere, touching everything, yelling questions that no one answered. The boy had the wild energy of children who have never known boundaries. The rest of the afternoon passed in a tense atmosphere. During the dinner Eliza served in the main dining room, Julian and Tara barely spoke to Dame Eleanor. The conversations were superficial, full of awkward pauses. Leo couldn't stay seated for a minute, constantly getting up to run around the table or tug the tablecloth. "Leo, sit down," Tara said without conviction, barely looking at him. Dame Eleanor watched her grandson with a mixture of love and sadness. Eliza noticed it as she collected the plates. The millionaire reached out a hand to the boy as he passed near her, but Leo dodged her and kept running. The pain in Dame Eleanor's eyes was like a dagger to Eliza. After dinner, Julian and Tara retired to their room, claiming travel fatigue. Leo, however, was still bursting with energy. Dame Eleanor suggested he go out and play in the garden where there was more space. The boy ran out without waiting for an answer. "Eliza," Dame Eleanor called when she finished washing the dishes. "Go outside and watch the boy. I don't trust his parents to be attentive." Eliza went into the garden with a knot in her stomach. The sun was beginning to set, staining the sky orange and purple. Leo ran among the trees, chasing imaginary butterflies and shouting at the top of his lungs. Eliza followed at a safe distance, ready to intervene if necessary. The homestead garden was enormous, with perfectly manicured lawns, old rose bushes, and at the back, near the property line, an artificial billabong Dame Eleanor's grandfather had built decades ago. The billabong was about 20 meters across and surrounded by weeping willows. The water looked dark and deep under the evening light. Leo ran toward the billabong as if drawn by a magnet. Eliza quickened her pace. "Leo, don't go too close to the water," she called in a firm but kind voice. The boy looked at her over his shoulder and smiled with that mischievous grin all children have when they know they're about to do something forbidden. Then he kept running, closer and closer to the edge. "Leo, stop," Eliza insisted, now with urgency in her voice. But the boy crouched next to the water, fascinated by something floating on the surface. Eliza was 5 meters away when she saw what was going to happen a split second before it did. Leo leaned too far, lost his balance. His arms flailed in the air, searching for something to hold on to, and then he fell into the water with a splash that echoed in the silence of the twilight like a gunshot. Eliza didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't doubt for a single instant. She plunged into the billabong, clothes and shoes and all, with the whole weight of the world on her shoulders. The water was freezing and deeper than it looked. She sank to the bottom, feeling the cold mud under her feet before pushing herself up. Her eyes stung from the dirty water, but she managed to see Leo's small figure sinking, his little arms weakly flailing, his mouth open in a silent scream. Eliza swam toward him with all the strength left in her body. She grabbed the boy around the waist, just as he was about to give up, pulled him to her chest, and kicked with her legs, fighting against the weight of the water-soaked clothes, dragging her down. Every movement was agony. Her lungs screamed for air, her muscles trembled with exhaustion, but she didn't give up. She surfaced with Leo in her arms, coughing and spitting water. The boy cried in terror, clinging to her with surprising strength for someone so small. Eliza swam toward the bank, each stroke harder than the last, until finally her hands touched the grass. She crawled out of the billabong with the boy still glued to her chest, shivering violently, soaked to the bone. Leo coughed and cried, but he was alive. He was breathing. Eliza laid him on the grass and checked his mouth to make sure he hadn't swallowed too much water. The boy looked up at her with enormous eyes, full of tears and fear. "It's all right," Eliza whispered, stroking his wet hair. "You're safe now. It's all over." The screams arrived a moment later. Dame Eleanor ran from the house with a speed Eliza wouldn't have believed possible in a woman her age. Behind her came Julian and Tara, faces contorted with panic. "Leo!" Tara shrieked, falling to her knees next to her son and snatching him from Eliza's arms. "My baby! My baby!" Julian also knelt, checking his son with trembling hands. Dame Eleanor, in contrast, looked directly at Eliza. Her grey eyes were full of tears. "You saved him," the millionaire whispered. "You saved him." Eliza couldn't answer. Suddenly, all the adrenaline that had sustained her evaporated, and she began to tremble uncontrollably. Dame Eleanor wrapped her own shawl around Eliza and helped her stand up. "Jess!" Dame Eleanor shouted toward the house. "Bring blankets and hot water, fast." That night, after Leo was taken to the hospital as a precaution and returned with a clean bill of health, after Eliza had changed clothes and drunk hot tea until she stopped shaking, Dame Eleanor called her to her study. The millionaire was sitting behind her mahogany desk, hands clasped, gaze lost on the wall. When Eliza entered, Dame Eleanor looked up. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Sit down," she said softly. Eliza obeyed, feeling strangely nervous. Dame Eleanor took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for something very difficult. "Eliza, you risked your life for my grandson, a boy you didn't even know. You jumped into the water without thinking, asking for nothing in return. And that her voice broke, that is something I will never be able to forget, much less repay." "You don't have to repay me for anything, Mom," Eliza replied honestly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Dame Eleanor said firmly. "Not anyone. Most people would have yelled for help. They would have hesitated. You didn't hesitate for a second." She stood up and walked to the window. "For months I have watched you, Eliza. I've seen how you work without complaint, how you face the town gossips with your head held high, how you love your children with every fiber of your being. And today you confirmed what I already knew. You are an extraordinary woman." Eliza felt tears welling up, but she held them back. Dame Eleanor returned to the desk and took a folder from one of the drawers. She opened it and extracted several documents. "Do you remember the skew whiff house I showed you 2 weeks ago?" Eliza nodded, confused. "That house is yours. I am giving it to you now as a sign of my gratitude. The deeds are here. Tomorrow we will go to the solicitor to make the official transfer." Eliza was speechless. The skew whiff house, that tilted, old, abandoned structure, it wasn't much, but it was infinitely more than she had. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Dame Eleanor interrupted with a smile. "Just accept it. It is yours, and what's inside is also yours." Those last words hung in the air like an unrevealed secret. Eliza opened her mouth to ask what they meant, but Dame Eleanor had already put away the documents and was walking toward the door. "Now go home to your children," the millionaire said. "We'll talk about the details tomorrow." Eliza stopped on the threshold and looked at her one last time. "Thank you. Thank you for saving the only thing in this world that still truly matters to me." Eliza returned to her small rented house that night, walking as if in a dream. A house. Dame Eleanor had given her a skew whiff, old, abandoned house, but a home, finally a place of their own. The first step toward a better life for her and her children. But something in Dame Eleanor's words kept resonating in her mind. "And what's inside is also yours." What was inside that crooked house? What secret did it hide that made it tilt so strangely? And why had Dame Eleanor smiled with that mix of sadness and relief when she said it was all hers? The answers were there, waiting for her in that tilted house. And when she finally discovered them, Eliza would understand that the rescue of Leo hadn't just been an act of heroism. It had been the key that unlocked a destiny that would change her life and the lives of her 6 children forever. But before that, before the move and the discovery, she would have to face something she didn't expect. The fury of Dame Eleanor's niece and nephew, Brendan and Chloe, who had just found out that their aunt had given away one of her properties to a mere housekeeper, and they weren't going to let it stand. The news spread through Wagga like wildfire in a drought. Eliza O'Connell, the poor widow who cleaned other people's floors, now had a property in her name. The town's venomous tongues worked tirelessly. At the shops, in the square, at the church doors. The gossip grew and twisted with every repetition. They say she seduced the millionaire's son, Shaza, from the RSL, muttered to a group of friends. That's why she got the house. She must have something going on with him. Nah, I heard the boy fell in the billabong on purpose, another added. It was all a plan to get money out of Dame Eleanor. Eliza heard the rumors when she went to buy groceries or pick up her children from school, and every word was like a slap. But it didn't bother her as much as before. She had something more important to focus on. Her 6 children would finally have a roof over their heads, even if it was a tilted one. On Wednesday morning, Dame Eleanor arrived to pick her up in her Land Cruiser. Eliza got in nervously, stomach tied in knots. They were going to the office of Mr. Wallace, the solicitor, a serious man with thick glasses and a graying moustache who had handled the Kingsley family's legal affairs for over 30 years. As Dame Eleanor drove through the paved streets of the town center, Eliza noticed a black car following them at a distance. It was a dark Mercedes with tinted windows. Something about that vehicle sent a shiver of warning down her spine. The solicitor's office was in an old 2-story terrace house with wrought iron balconies and carved wooden doors. When they entered the main office, Eliza was surprised to find 2 other people waiting. Brendan and Chloe Kingsley, Dame Eleanor's niece and nephew. Brendan was a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and an expensive suit that couldn't hide his calculating gaze. Chloe, his younger sister, was 35, with a face that would have been beautiful were it not for the bitter expression that seemed permanent on her dark red lips. Aunt Eleanor, Brendan said with a honeyed voice that didn't match the ice in his eyes. What a surprise to find you here. We didn't know you had an appointment with the solicitor. I didn't have to tell you, Dame Eleanor replied dryly. My affairs are none of your concern. But Aunt, Chloe interjected with false sweetness. We're family. Everything you do concerns us, especially when it involves giving away family property to strangers. Her eyes fixed on Eliza with a contempt so pure it was almost tangible. Eliza felt the ground opening up beneath her. How had they found out so fast? Eliza is not a stranger, Dame Eleanor said, lifting her chin with dignity. She saved my grandson's life, something neither of you would have done. That doesn't give her the right to receive properties that have belonged to our family for generations, Brendan spat, dropping the mask of courtesy. That house belonged to your grandfather, our great-grandfather. You can't just give it away to a housekeeper. Mr. Wallace, the solicitor, cleared his throat uncomfortably from his desk. Dame Eleanor has every legal right to dispose of her properties as she sees fit, he said in a professional voice. The house in question has been in her name for over 20 years. There is no legal impediment to the transfer. But there is a moral impediment, Chloe insisted. Aunt, that house is part of our family heritage. You can't do this. Mum and Dad would be turning in their graves if they knew. Your father, Dame Eleanor replied with a voice that cut like glass, was my younger brother and a greedy man who borrowed money from me all his life without paying back a single cent. So don't come to me with talk of family heritage. The silence that followed was so thick, Eliza could almost feel it pressing against her skin. She wanted to disappear, to become invisible, not to be there in the middle of this family feud. But Dame Eleanor took her hand and squeezed it firmly. Mr. Wallace, the millionaire said, without looking away from her niece and nephew. Proceed with the transfer now. The next 30 minutes were torture. Eliza signed where she was directed, her hands trembling and her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Brendan and Chloe remained seated in a corner, shooting her looks of pure hatred that promised revenge. When the process was finished and the solicitor handed her the deeds in a manila envelope, Eliza felt her legs could barely hold her. Dame Eleanor guided her toward the exit, completely ignoring her niece and nephew. But just as they reached the door, Brendan spoke, his voice low and full of menace. This isn't over, Aunt. We're going to challenge this transfer. And as for you, his eyes bored into Eliza, enjoy your little skew-whiff shack while you can. It won't be yours for long. In the Land Cruiser on the way back to the homestead, Dame Eleanor drove in silence for a long time. Finally, when they were leaving the town, she spoke. Don't listen to them. They have no legal power to take that house from you. The deeds are in your name. It's yours, Eliza. Yours and your children's. But Eliza didn't feel calm. She knew men like Brendan. She knew that kind of hatred, and knew he wouldn't stop just because the law wasn't on his side. That afternoon after work, Eliza gathered her 6 children in their small rented house and gave them the news. Liam, the eldest, looked at her with a mix of joy and disbelief. A house, Mum? Really? Really, my darling. It's old and a bit skew-whiff, but it's ours. We finally have a place of our own. The twins, Jed and Finn, screamed with excitement. Ruby and Pip hugged their mother, crying with happiness. Only little Oscar, 2 years old, didn't quite understand what was happening, but he smiled because everyone else was smiling. They spent the next 3 days preparing for the move. They didn't have much to pack: clothes, a few pots, the children's worn toys, school notebooks, but every item felt lighter now that they knew they were taking it to a home of their own. Early Saturday morning, they arrived at the Skewiff house with the help of a neighbor who had a utility truck. The children ran out of the vehicle and stood in front of the property with their mouths open. The house was even stranger than Eliza remembered. The entire structure leaned toward the east, as if something incredibly heavy was pulling it from that side. The red-tiled roof was partially sunken. The weatherboard walls showed deep cracks. The wooden windows were swollen with damp. The front porch curved at an impossible angle. Around the house, the land was covered in tall weeds and wild trees that hadn't been pruned in decades. "Mom," Ruby whispered, taking Eliza's hand. "Are we really going to live here?" "Yes, my love. And we'll fix it up, little by little. You'll see, it's going to be beautiful." But inside, Eliza felt a pang of doubt. How was this place going to be habitable? She had no money for repairs, barely enough for food. She opened the front door, which groaned with a sound like a lament, and they all went inside together. The interior was dark and smelled of old damp. The wooden floor was covered in dust and dry leaves that had blown in through the broken windows. In the living room were old pieces of furniture covered with white sheets that looked like ghosts in the gloom. But what caught Eliza's attention most was the house's strange layout. There was a large lounge, a small kitchen with a wood-burning stove, 2 bedrooms on the left, a tiny bathroom, and a bolted door at the end of a short hallway on the east side of the house. The door was made of thick wood, with an old rusty padlock hanging from an iron ring. Eliza approached the door and touched it with her palm. The wood was cold, too cold to be normal. And when she put her ear against the surface, she thought she heard something. Not a sound exactly, but more a presence, as if the room were breathing. "Mum, what's in there?" Liam asked, approaching curiously. "I don't know. It's locked. Can we open it?" Eliza looked at the padlock. It was old but sturdy. They would need tools to break it open, or the key. "I'll find a way to open it tomorrow," she promised. "Now, help me clean. We have a lot of work to do." They spent the whole day sweeping, mopping, taking the sheets off the old furniture, opening windows to let in fresh air. The children worked with surprising energy, singing and laughing despite their tiredness. For them, this was an adventure, a new beginning. When the sun began to set, Eliza made a simple dinner with the provisions she had brought: canned beans, tortillas heated on the wood stove, and a little cheese. They ate sitting on the lounge floor as if it were a picnic, and for the first time in a long time, Eliza felt something akin to peace. That night, she tucked the children into the 2 bedrooms, sharing old mattresses they had found in a cupboard. Eliza stayed awake a little longer, sitting on the crooked porch, looking at the stars shining over the wild block of land. She thought of Dame Eleanor, her generosity, the secret in her words, and what's inside is also yours. What was inside that Skewiff house? What secret was hidden that made it tilt so strangely? And why had Dame Eleanor smiled with that mixture of sadness and relief when she said it was all hers? She got up and walked back to the bolted door. The full moon shone through the broken windows, creating strange shadows on the tilted walls. Eliza touched the padlock with her fingers and again felt that unnatural cold. "What are you hiding?" she whispered to the door. "What weighs so much that it makes the whole house lean toward you?" There was no answer, of course, just the silence of the night and the distant chirping of crickets. But when she returned to the lounge to sleep on the old sofa, Eliza noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the frame of the bolted door, almost invisible in the gloom, there was a small inscription carved into the wood. She approached with a candle she had lit and read the time-worn words, "What you protect with your life will protect you." A shiver ran down her back. Who had carved that? Dame Eleanor's grandfather? And what did it mean? Eliza was about to turn away when she heard something that left her frozen. A sound coming from inside the bolted room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was just a faint creak, like old wood settling, or like something very heavy moving barely a millimeter. And then, in the silence that followed, Eliza would have sworn she heard something else. Something that sounded impossibly like a deep, slow, patient breath, as if whatever was in that room had been waiting for years, decades, waiting for someone to arrive, waiting for the right person to finally open the door and discover what Dame Eleanor had kept hidden from the world for so long. What had caused that house to tilt under the weight of the greatest secret of her life? Sunday dawned under a gray sky that threatened rain. Eliza woke up on the old sofa, her body aching and her mind restless. The sounds of the previous night hadn't let her sleep well. Every creak of the house, every groan of the old wood, made her think of that bolted room and what might be hidden behind that door. She made coffee on the wood stove and went out onto the porch to drink it while the children were still sleeping. The land looked different under the gray morning light, more wild, more abandoned. The trees surrounding the property were enormous and twisted, with branches extending like arthritic fingers toward the sky. The weeds reached the house windows. In the distance, she could see the dirt track that connected the property to the main highway. She was taking the last sip of coffee when she saw the car, the same black Mercedes that had followed them to the solicitor's office. It stopped on the track about 50 meters from the house, but didn't switch off the engine. The tinted windows made it impossible to see who was inside, but Eliza knew with absolute certainty that it was Brendan Kingsley. The car remained there for 5 eternal minutes, just watching, just waiting. Then, as silently as it had arrived, it turned around and drove away, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Eliza felt a knot of fear in her stomach. That man wasn't going to give up, and she was alone here with 6 children in a house that was barely standing. When the children woke up, Eliza kept them busy with cleaning chores and minor repairs. Liam helped fix a broken window using cardboard and duct tape. The twins pulled more weeds from the garden. Ruby and Pip swept the porch. Even little Oscar helped by collecting twigs and putting them in a bucket. But Eliza's mind was elsewhere. It was in that bolted room, on the rusty padlock, on the inscription carved on the frame, on the sounds she had heard during the night. What you protect with your life will protect you. What did that mean? What was in there that needed protection, or that could protect her? Near midday, when the rain finally began to fall, an unexpected visitor arrived. A white Land Cruiser pulled up in front of the house, and Dame Eleanor stepped out, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, carrying a large basket covered with a cloth. "I came to see how you're settling in," the millionaire said, as she stepped onto the porch, avoiding the most warped boards, "and to bring you a few things." The basket contained food, freshly baked bread, cheese, ham, fruit, milk, and even a whole roast chicken. The children gathered around, eyes shining with excitement. Eliza felt tears threatening to overflow. "Mom, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Dame Eleanor interrupted firmly. "And don't call me Ma'am. Call me Eleanor. You don't work for me anymore. Now you're a friend." The word hung in the air, strange and new for both of them, but also true. Dame Eleanor entered the house and looked around with a critical eye. When she reached the hallway leading to the bolted door, she stopped. Her face became serious. "Have you tried to open it yet?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the door. "I don't have the key, and the padlock is very old. I'd need tools to break it." Dame Eleanor reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, time-darkened key. She held it out to Eliza as if delivering something sacred. "This is the key," she said softly. "But before you open that door, I need to explain a few things. Can we talk alone?" Eliza asked Liam to watch his siblings and followed Dame Eleanor out to the porch. They sat on the warped stairs as the rain fell heavily, creating a curtain of privacy around them. Dame Eleanor took a deep breath before speaking. "My grandfather, Cornelio Kingsley, built this house over 90 years ago. He was a very rich man, but also very cautious. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust anyone really. So he decided to store his fortune in a particular way." Eliza listened in silence, her heart beating faster. "For years my grandfather accumulated valuable items. Colonial art, ancient religious sculptures, jewelry from the turn of the century, silver coins from the mines, historical documents, rare books, things that today are worth a fortune. He stored everything in that room, and the weight of so many objects after decades is what made the house tilt like that." Eliza felt the world stop around her. The sound of the rain became distant. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "Are you saying that inside that room there's a fortune?" "A fortune," Dame Eleanor completed. "A fortune my grandfather left to my grandmother, which then passed to my father, which then passed to me. But I never took it out of there, never sold it. I left it in that room all these years because I knew if my family found out the true value of what was inside, they would kill me to get it. Brendan and Chloe, they don't know. They know the house exists, they know it's abandoned and skew-whiff, but they think it's just a worthless old property. My grandfather was very clever. He never registered the contents of the room in any official inventory. To the world, those things don't exist. And I kept that secret for over 20 years. Eliza felt a sudden dizziness. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why are you telling me this? Why did you give me the house with everything inside? Dame Eleanor looked at her with those penetrating gray eyes, but this time there was tenderness in them and profound sadness. Because I have no one else I can trust. My husband died 22 years ago. My son lives in Melbourne and only visits out of obligation. My niece and nephew are only waiting for me to die so they can divide up the little they think I have. I am alone, Eliza, completely alone. Her voice broke. But then I watched you work. I watched you endure humiliations with dignity. I watched you love your children with a strength I never had. And when you jumped into that billabong without thinking to save my grandson, I knew you were the right person, the only person who deserved this. I can't accept this, Eliza said, standing up abruptly. It's too much. I only did what any decent person would have done. I don't deserve a fortune for that. It's not for that, Dame Eleanor insisted, also standing up. It's for who you are, for how you've lived your life even in the worst adversity, and because I know you will use that fortune for good for your children, to give them the life they deserve. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but the words wouldn't come out because deep down in her heart, she knew this opportunity was a miracle, a second chance life was giving her after so much suffering. Dame Eleanor placed the key in the palm of her hand and closed Eliza's fingers around it. Open the room when you're ready. Take your time. You don't have to decide anything now, but I want you to know that everything in there is legally yours. The deeds to the house include the contents. It's protected by inheritance laws that no one can touch, not even my niece and nephew, though they will try. And you? You don't need any of it? Dame Eleanor smiled sadly. I already had my life. I already had my chance. Now it's yours, and your children's. They stood in silence for a long time, listening to the rain, each lost in her thoughts. Finally, Dame Eleanor said goodbye with a hug Eliza hadn't expected, and left in her white Land Cruiser, disappearing into the curtain of water. Eliza stood on the porch with the key in her hand, trembling, not from cold, but from anticipation mixed with fear. Inside that house, behind that bolted door, waited something that could change her life forever, but also something that made her vulnerable. Because if Brendan and Chloe found out the true value of what was inside, a clap of thunder boomed in the sky so loud it made the house shake. The children cried out, scared, from inside. Eliza rushed in to calm them. That night, after a simple dinner and putting the children to bed, Eliza stood in front of the bolted door with the key in her hand. The house was absolutely silent, except for the steady drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional creak of the wood. She reached out to the padlock. The key slid into the lock as if it had been waiting for this moment for decades. It turned with a metallic click that echoed in the hallway like a gunshot. The padlock opened. Eliza removed it with trembling hands and let it fall to the floor. She put her hand on the doorknob. It was icy. She took a deep breath, once, twice, 3 times. Then she pushed. The door opened slowly with a long, agonizing screech. The darkness inside was absolute. Eliza couldn't see anything beyond the threshold. Only darkness and that strange smell, like old paper and antique wood, and something else she couldn't identify. She felt for a light switch next to the door, but didn't find one. Of course not. This house is very old. It wouldn't have electricity in that room. She would need candles or an oil lamp, something to illuminate that space that had remained sealed for so long. She was about to close the door when she saw something that made her heart stop. In the absolute darkness of the room, something glittered. It wasn't much, just a faint flash, like light reflecting on a polished surface. But it was there, and it seemed to move slightly, as if it were breathing. Eliza took a step back, every hair on her body standing on end. And then, from somewhere in the depths of that dark room, she heard a sound that couldn't be real, a sound that left her completely paralyzed. The delicate clinking of metal against metal, like falling coins or chains moving, or something heavy settling into place after being disturbed. And beneath that almost imperceptible sound, something else, a whisper, not of voices but of the air itself moving inside the room, as if the space had been sealed for so long that the simple act of opening the door had woken something that was sleeping. Eliza slammed the door shut, her heart pounding so hard her chest ached. She leaned against the hallway wall, trembling, trying to catch her breath. Tomorrow she would go in with daylight, with candles, with her children awake in the house so she wouldn't feel so alone. Tomorrow she would face whatever waited in that room. But as she returned to the lounge to try to sleep, a part of her knew the truth. After having opened that door, after having disturbed what slept within, nothing would ever be the same. And not just because of the fortune she hoped to discover, but because by opening that door, she had released something else. Something Dame Eleanor had kept locked away for decades. A secret so immense, so heavy, that it had caused an entire house to tilt under its weight. A secret that Brendan and Chloe Kingsley were about to discover, because at that very moment, while Eliza was unsuccessfully trying to sleep, the black Mercedes was parked again on the dirt track, and Brendan was inside, speaking urgently into his phone, giving precise instructions to someone on the other end of the line, instructions that involved the Skew-Whiff house and a widow who had no idea of the danger approaching. Monday dawned with a disturbing silence. The rain had ceased during the night, leaving the ground soaked and the air heavy with moisture. Eliza woke up early, her body aching from the sofa and her mind still trapped by the sounds she had heard behind the bolted door. She made breakfast for the children, hot porridge with a little sugar and cinnamon, the last remaining bread, watery coffee. As they ate, Eliza noticed Liam watching her with concern. "Mum, are you all right? You look tired." "I'm fine, darling. I just slept poorly." But it wasn't just that. All night, she had the feeling that someone was watching the house from outside. Several times she had gotten up to look through the broken windows, but never saw anything but darkness and trees swaying in the wind. After breakfast, she asked Liam to stay and watch his siblings. She took 3 thick candles she had found in a kitchen drawer, a lighter, and walked toward the hallway with a determined step. She couldn't postpone this any longer. She needed to know what was in that room. She needed to understand why Dame Eleanor had given her something so valuable. The door was exactly as she had left it the night before, closed with the padlock on the floor. Eliza lit the 3 candles, placed 2 on the hallway floor for backup light, and held the third with a firm hand. Then she pushed the door. This time, it opened without resistance, as if the room had accepted that it would finally be revealed. The candlelight penetrated the darkness, and what Eliza saw took her breath away. The room was larger than she expected, perhaps 5 by 6 meters, but every centimeter was occupied. The walls were covered with dark wooden shelves, and on those shelves was everything objects piled with meticulous care, protected with cloths, organized by categories that revealed the orderly mind of Dame Eleanor's grandfather. Eliza took a step forward, raising the candle to see better. Her breathing quickened. On the nearest shelf were framed religious paintings, colonial Madonnas with golden halos, saints with serene expressions, Christ figures carved in ancient wood. Eliza recognized the style, and though she didn't know much about art, even she could see they were old, very old, centuries old. Further on, in wooden boxes with brass locks, were books, hundreds of books. Eliza opened a box carefully and pulled out the top volume. It was a massive book with embossed leather covers and pages yellowed by time. The title was in Old English, almost illegible, but she made out a date, 1683, 342 years old. She kept moving forward, her legs shaking. In the center of the room were iron chests with padlocks that were also open, as if Dame Eleanor had wanted Eliza to access everything without difficulty. She knelt in front of the first one and opened it. Coins, hundreds, maybe thousands, of silver coins shone in the candlelight like tiny stars. Eliza picked one up with trembling fingers. It was heavy, cold. It had an emblem engraved on it, and letters she couldn't quite read, but she knew this was pure silver from the colonial mines. The second chest contained jewelry, enormous pearl necklaces, rings with precious stones that flashed with color when the candlelight touched them, worked gold bracelets, antique brooches with inlaid diamonds. Eliza knew nothing about jewelry, but even she could see these objects weren't simple ornaments. They were historical treasures. The third chest almost made her cry. It was full of silver bars, perfectly stacked, each the size of a brick. Eliza counted 30 bars. Then she stopped counting because tears blurred her vision. But that wasn't all. There were more shelves at the back of the room. She stood up and walked there, feeling her legs could barely support her. She found religious sculptures of carved wood, some so detailed they seemed alive. Gold and silver chalices, manuscripts rolled up in leather tubes, ancient hand-drawn maps, official documents with red wax seals, pre-Columbian jade, and obsidian figures that Dame Eleanor's grandfather must have collected on his travels. In one corner, wrapped in velvet cloths, were unframed paintings. Eliza carefully unwrapped one and almost dropped the candle. It was a portrait of a 17th century Spanish woman dressed in silks and lace, gazing at the viewer with penetrating eyes. The painting was signed in the lower corner, but Eliza didn't recognize the name. However, the technique, the colors, The way the light seemed to emanate from the woman's face, this was the work of a master. Eliza carefully put the painting down and sat on the wooden floor, unable to stand any longer. Around her, in that room that had caused the entire house to tilt under its weight, was a fortune that surpassed anything she could have imagined. It wasn't just money, it was history, it was art. It was the legacy of generations accumulated with patience and vision, and now it was hers and her 6 children's. She didn't know how long she sat there, crying in silence as the candle burned down. She thought of Darren, her dead husband, who had worked until the last day of his life without complaint. She thought of the humiliations she had endured in Wagga. She thought of the nights her children had gone to sleep hungry. She thought of all the times she had begged God to give her a chance, just one, to give her children a better life. And God had answered, but not as she expected, not with a better job or a stroke of luck, but through Dame Eleanor, a solitary woman who had seen something in Eliza that no one else had: dignity, kindness, courage. What you protect with your life will protect you. Now, she understood the inscription on the doorframe. Dame Eleanor's grandfather had protected this fortune with his life, keeping it hidden from the world. And now that fortune would protect Eliza and her children. It would give them education, health, opportunities. It would give them the future they deserved. But first, she had to protect it. Because if Brendan and Chloe found out what was here, the thought was interrupted by a shout from Liam in the lounge. "Mum! Mum, come quick!" Eliza jumped up, carefully put the candle on the floor, and ran toward the lounge. She found her 6 children huddled near the window, looking outside with frightened faces. "What's wrong?" "There's a man outside," Liam whispered. "He's taking photos of the house." Eliza peered through the broken window and felt her stomach knot. It was Brendan Kingsley. He was standing in the front garden in broad daylight with a professional camera in his hands. He was photographing the house from every angle: the front, the sides, the sunken roof, the broken windows, and worst of all, he was wearing a smart suit and a satisfied smile that boded no good. Eliza stepped out onto the porch, her heart pounding in her throat. Brendan stopped taking photos and looked at her with that smile that was more a threat than a friendly gesture. "Good morning, Eliza. Hope I'm not interrupting." "What are you doing here?" "Just documenting the property," he replied in a sickly sweet voice. "You see, my solicitor advised me to record the current state of this shack for the legal file. Understand? Dame Eleanor already gave me the deeds. The house is legally mine. You can't do anything to change that." Brendan's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold as ice. "Oh no, I'm not trying to take the house from you, Eliza. That would be difficult. But there are other ways to solve this problem." He put the camera in his bag and approached the porch. "Look at this place. It's about to fall down. It has no electricity, no running water. The walls have huge cracks. The roof is sunken. Do you really think it's safe to live here with 6 young children?" Eliza felt a shiver of warning. "I can fix it up little by little." "With what money?" Brendan's voice hardened. "You're a poor woman, Eliza, a widow without resources. And this house needs repairs that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions. How are you going to pay for that? That's none of your business." "But it is the business of the Shire Council building inspectors," Brendan said with a triumphant smile. "It turns out I have a friend who works there, and I just happened to mention yesterday that a widow with 6 children had moved into a structurally unsafe house. He told me they're coming to do an inspection, probably tomorrow. And when they see the state of this place," he shrugged, "they'll condemn it. They'll prohibit you from living here. And then what are you going to do?" Eliza felt the world crumbling around her. He was right. The house was a mess, and if the Shire Council declared it uninhabitable— "But don't worry," Brendan continued with false compassion. "I have a solution. I'll buy the house from you. I'll offer you $50,000. Cash. Today. It's more than this ruin is worth. With that money, you can rent something decent in town while you find work." $50,000. It was a fortune for someone in her situation, but it was nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what was in the bolted room. "It's not for sale," Eliza said in a firm voice, though she was trembling inside. Brendan's smile vanished. His face hardened until it looked carved from stone. "You'll regret this," he said in a low, menacing voice. "My aunt made a mistake giving you this property, and I'm going to correct that mistake one way or another." He turned and walked toward his black Mercedes. Before getting in, he turned one last time. "Oh, and by the way, I told a few people in Wagga about this house and about your good luck. You know how country people are gossipy. Curious. I imagine you'll soon have a lot of visitors. People asking what's so special about this old house that my aunt gave it to you. People speculating. People investigating. The message was clear. Brendan was going to spread rumors. He was going to draw attention to this property. And if enough people started asking questions, eventually someone would discover the secret of the bolted room. The Mercedes roared to life and drove away, kicking up dust. Eliza stood on the porch, shaking with fury and fear. Her children came out of the house and huddled around her. "Mum, who was that man?" Ruby asked, her voice scared. "No one important, darling. Just a bad man who will soon learn that he can't intimidate us." But inside, Eliza knew the truth. She was in serious trouble. Brendan was going to use every resource at his disposal to take this house from her, and she had no money to hire solicitors. She had no political connections. She had nothing except a skew-whiff house full of treasures she couldn't sell without attracting dangerous questions. She needed help, and there was only one person in the world who could give it to her. "Liam," she called her eldest son. "I need you to stay and watch your brothers and sisters. I'm going out for a bit." "Where are you going?" "To see Dame Eleanor. This can't wait." Eliza walked down the dirt track to the main highway, where she managed to flag down a passing car that took her into Wagga. From there, she took a taxi she couldn't afford out to Kingsley Downs. When she knocked on the service door, Jess opened it. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" "I thought you were. I need to talk to Dame Eleanor. It's urgent." Jess let her in and went to find the millionaire. Eliza waited in the kitchen, hands clasped, heart racing. When Dame Eleanor entered, her face filled with concern. "What happened? Are you all right? Are the children well?" "Brendan came to the house this morning," Eliza said without preamble. "He took photos. He said he's going to call the Shire Council building inspectors to condemn the property, and he's spreading rumors in town to make people wonder what's so special about that house." Dame Eleanor closed her eyes and let out a long, weary sigh. "I knew he would do something like this. My nephew never accepts defeat." She opened her eyes and looked at Eliza with determination. "But neither he nor the Shire Council can take that house from you if you don't want to sell it. The deeds are legal and unassailable, but if they declare it uninhabitable, I won't be able to live there. And then Brendan will keep pushing until I have no choice but to sell. Not if we fix the house first. I don't have the money for repairs, and you've already given me too much. I can't ask you for more." Dame Eleanor took Eliza's hands in hers. "Eliza, you opened the room." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "You saw what's inside?" "Yes, I saw. Everything. I can't believe it's real. I can't believe it's mine now." "Then you know the answer," Dame Eleanor said softly. "Sell one piece. Just one. Something small that won't attract much attention. Use that money to fix the house. Make it habitable. And when the Shire Council comes to inspect it, they won't have any legal argument to condemn it." Eliza looked at her, eyes wide. "Sell a piece? But how? Where? To whom?" "I'll help you. I know discreet collectors, people who pay well and don't ask awkward questions." Dame Eleanor smiled. "My grandfather wasn't the only one in the family with connections, you know." For the first time all day, Eliza felt a spark of hope. "Go back to your house," Dame Eleanor continued. "Choose one piece from the room, something valuable, but not too large. Bring it to me early tomorrow, and let me handle the rest." Eliza hugged the millionaire tightly, unable to express the gratitude she felt in words. Dame Eleanor returned the embrace, and in that moment, the two solitary women held onto each other like castaways in the middle of a storm. When Eliza returned to the skew-whiff house, it was already late. The sun was setting, staining the sky orange and purple. Her children ran to greet her, relieved she was back. She made them a simple dinner and put them to bed early, singing them songs Darren used to sing when he was alive. Then, when the whole house was silent, Eliza returned to the bolted room with a candle in her hand. She knelt in front of the chests and carefully began to examine their contents, searching for something she could sell without feeling like she was betraying Dame Eleanor's gift. Finally, at the bottom of the second chest, she found a necklace. It was beautiful but not ostentatious. A delicate gold chain with an oval locket, containing a miniature portrait of a young woman. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly antique, probably early 19th century valuable, but not as much as the silver bars or colonial paintings. Eliza held it up to the candlelight, admiring the details of the locket. Then she carefully put it in her pocket. Tomorrow, she would begin to change their destiny. But as she closed the room door and walked back to the lounge, she didn't see the figure watching the house from the trees across the track. She didn't see the glint of binoculars reflecting the moonlight. She didn't hear the click of a camera taking photographs in the darkness. Brendan Kingsley wasn't in this alone. He had hired someone who would watch that house day and night, someone who would report Eliza's every move, every entry, every exit, every visitor. And when they finally discovered the secret that Skewwiff House hid, when they finally understood why Dame Eleanor had given it to a simple housekeeper, the real war would just begin. Tuesday dawned under a clear sky that promised intense heat. Eliza got up before dawn, cleaned herself up as best she could with the cold water from the rusty tap in the bathroom, and dressed in her most presentable clothes. The antique necklace rested in a small cloth bag in her pocket, weighing more because of its meaning than its size. She left Liam in charge of his siblings with strict instructions. Don't open the door to anyone. Keep the windows that still had glass closed. And if they saw Brendan's black Mercedes, hide in the back room until it left. Mum, you're scaring me, Liam said with a frown. He was 14, but sometimes he seemed much older, especially since his father's death. Don't be scared, darling. Just be cautious. I'll be back before noon. The journey to Kingsley Downs felt eternal. Every minute spent away from her children was agony. But when she finally arrived and Dame Eleanor opened the door personally, Eliza felt she could breathe again. Come in, come in. I was waiting for you. In Dame Eleanor's private study, Eliza pulled out the necklace with trembling hands. The millionaire examined it under the window light, turning the locket between her fingers with expert care. It's beautiful. Late 1800s, I'd say. Probably from Europe, brought to Australia during the gold rush era. She looked up at Eliza. You chose well. This is valuable, but not so rare as to attract too much attention. Mom, how much do you think it's worth? On the open market with certificates of authenticity and provenance, it could be worth between $200,000 and $300,000. But we're not going to the open market. Dame Eleanor wrapped the necklace back in the cloth. I have a friend in Sydney, Alistair Vance. He's a very discreet private collector. I've sold him things before. He doesn't ask questions and pays in cash. He can give us $150,000 for this. Today, Eliza could barely believe what was happening. It was too easy, too fast. Doesn't he need papers, documents? Alistair smiled kindly. My dear, in my line of work, provenance is sometimes best not investigated too closely. I trust Eleanor's judgment. If she says this is legitimate, that's enough for me. 20 minutes later, Eliza left that office with a manila envelope full of $50 and eBay. I've won. Afrongo. It is Imos, Docs 5 and Imos Dane. Docs 5 Isfer, Estand. Even. The Finistard. In Finistard. And the Finistard. And I won too as Lynx. Cenotes. 150,000. A weight that was physical, but also symbolic. The weight of hope. On the way back, Dame Eleanor gave her practical advice. Look for Bluey Thompson. He's a master builder in Wagga, the best in the region. Tell him I sent you. He can fix your house in 2 weeks if you work fast. Use $80,000 for the repairs. Keep the rest for emergencies and for your children. And if Brendan tries to stop the works, he can't, can he? It's your property, but work fast, Eliza, very fast. When Eliza returned to the Skewwiff house, it was nearly 3 in the afternoon. Her children ran to greet her, and she hugged them with a force that made them shout with laughter. Then she showed them the envelope with the money, without telling them exactly how much there was, and explained that they were going to fix the house. Really, Mum? Ruby asked with shining eyes. Will it have electricity and hot water? Yes, my love. Everything we need. That afternoon, Eliza walked into town and found Bluey Thompson at his workshop, a man in his 50s with enormous hands and a face weathered by the sun. When she mentioned Dame Eleanor's name, Bluey straightened up with respect. If Dame Eleanor sends me, then I work for you. When do we start? Tomorrow. And I need you to work fast, very fast. Bluey arrived at dawn on Wednesday with a team of 5 men. They started immediately. They reinforced the main roof beams, repaired the cracks in the walls with new cement, replaced the broken windows, installed electricity with the help of a local sparky, connected the water pipes, and sanded and varnished the wooden floor. The house turned into a hive of activity. The children helped by carrying tools and sweeping up sawdust. Eliza cooked hearty meals for the workers and supervised every detail. And Bluey, keeping his word, worked from sunrise to sunset, without rest. But on Thursday afternoon, when Eliza went into town to buy more provisions, she heard the murmurs. The women at the shops were talking about her. They say she found money hidden in that house. No, I heard Dame Eleanor is secretly giving her more money. And if there's something valuable there, Why else would she give her a house? Eliza gritted her teeth and kept walking. The rumors Brendan had planted were growing like weeds, but she couldn't do anything about it except finish the repairs as quickly as possible. Friday brought the news Eliza had been dreading. Bluey called her while she was in the kitchen preparing lunch. "Mrs. O'Connell, there are some blokes outside. They say they're from the Shire Council building inspectors." Eliza's heart gave a painful lurch. She went out onto the porch and saw a white utility vehicle parked on the track. Two men dressed in blue shirts and carrying clipboards got out of the vehicle, and behind them, in his black Mercedes, was Brendan Kingsley with a satisfied smile. "Good day," said one of the inspectors, a stocky man in his 40s. "I'm Engineer Morales from the Shire Council. We received a report that this structure is unsafe. We've come to do an inspection." "Go right ahead," Eliza said in a firm voice, though she was trembling inside. "As you can see, we're doing repairs." Bluey approached with his rolled-up plans under his arm. "Engineer Morales, I'm Bluey Thompson, certified master builder. Here are the plans for the structural repairs we're undertaking. All up to code, all safe." The engineer reviewed the plans with a frown. His colleague walked around the property taking photographs, measuring cracks, checking beams. Brendan watched from his car, arms crossed and a tense expression. The inspection lasted more than 2 hours. Eliza waited, stomach tied in knots, while the inspectors checked every corner of the house. When they finally finished, Engineer Morales approached, his face serious. "Mrs. O'Connell, this house was in very precarious condition. Some of the main beams were rotten. The roof was at risk of collapse. The electrical systems were non-existent and dangerous." Eliza felt the world crashing down, but the engineer continued. "However, the repairs you are carrying out are adequate and professional. If Mr. Thompson continues with the work as planned, in 1 week, this structure will be completely habitable and safe." He signed his clipboard. "There is no eviction order. You can continue living here while the works are completed. I just ask you to be careful with the children around the construction areas." Eliza had to lean against the wall not to fall over. Bluey smiled discreetly. The other workers let out sighs of relief. Brendan got out of his car, his face red with fury. "How is this possible? This house is a public danger." "Mr. Kingsley," Engineer Morales said in a professional but cold tone, "the technical inspection does not support your claims. This property is being adequately repaired. There is no legal reason to condemn it." "But you don't understand. This woman has no right to be here. My aunt made a mistake in—" "Property matters are not the Shire Council's jurisdiction," the engineer interrupted. "If you have legal problems with the owner, resolve them in the courts." "Good day." The inspectors left in their ute. Brendan remained standing next to his Mercedes, shaking with rage. He looked at Eliza with pure hatred. "Where did you get the money?" he asked in a low, dangerous voice. "Where did you get the money to pay for all this?" "That's none of your business," Eliza replied, finding a courage she didn't know she had. "My aunt gave you more than the house, didn't she?" Brendan took a step toward her. "There's something else, something hidden here. That's why the house is skew-whiff. That's why she gave it to you. There's something valuable." "Get off my property," Eliza said firmly. "Now." Brendan looked at her for a long time, then smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just made a dangerous decision. "This isn't over," he whispered. "If my aunt gave you something more than this house, I'm going to find out. And when I do—" He didn't finish the sentence. He simply got into his car and drove away at top speed. Bluey approached Eliza and put a big, comforting hand on her shoulder. "That man is dangerous, Mrs. O'Connell. Be careful." The following days passed in a whirlwind of work. Bluey and his team worked from dawn to dusk. The house was transformed before Eliza's eyes. The walls were reinforced and painted a warm white. The roof was completely repaired with new tiles. The windows now had gleaming glass and solid wooden frames. Electricity illuminated every corner. Hot water ran through the new pipes. But the most impressive thing was the tilt. Bluey had installed structural supports that made the house look less skew-whiff, although it could obviously never be completely straight without a total reconstruction. Still, it was safe. It was habitable. It was a home. On Sunday, when the works were almost finished, Dame Eleanor came to visit them. She walked through the house with tears in her eyes. "My grandfather would be proud," she whispered. "You've brought this place back to life." That night, after Dame Eleanor left, Eliza put her children to bed in their newly painted rooms, with new beds she had bought with part of the remaining money. The children fell asleep smiling, exhausted but happy. Eliza sat on the porch, now repaired and stable, looking at the stars. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. They had succeeded, against all odds, against Brendan's threats, against the town rumors. They had turned this skew-whiff house into a home. But the peace was short-lived. At 3 in the morning, Eliza woke up to a strange sound, a creak. But it wasn't the normal creak of an old house settling. It was the creak of someone walking carefully, trying not to make a noise. She got up without turning on the lights and walked barefoot to the lounge. Moonlight shone through the new windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Everything seemed normal. Perhaps it was just her imagination. Then she heard another sound. This one came from outside, from the east side of the house, the side where the bolted room was. Eliza rushed to the nearest window and looked out. What she saw made her blood run cold. There was a man outside, dressed entirely in black, with a small torch. He was examining the exterior wall of the bolted room, touching it with his hands, measuring something with a tape measure. And next to him, in the darkness, was Brendan Kingsley. They were looking for something. They were trying to understand why that side of the house tilted so much. They were about to discover the room's secret, and Eliza, alone in the darkness of her house, with her 6 children asleep and defenseless, knew that the real war had just begun. Because if Brendan discovered what was in that room, if he understood the true value of what his aunt had given her, he would stop at nothing to take it from her. Absolutely nothing. Eliza watched from the dark window as Brendan and the man in black examined the exterior wall of the room. Their hands moved over the old weatherboard, looking for signs, measuring the depth of the tilt. The man pulled out what looked like a portable metal detector and slowly passed it over the wall. The device emitted a constant beep. Brendan smiled in the darkness. It was the smile of a predator who has just found its prey. Eliza backed away from the window, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to do something. But what? If she went out to confront them, they might become violent. If she called the police, they would be gone by the time they arrived. And worst of all, now Brendan knew. Maybe he didn't understand exactly what was in the room, but he knew there was something metallic, something heavy, something valuable. She ran to the telephone they had installed with a new power line and dialed the number for Kingsley Downs. It rang 4 times. 5, 6. Finally, Dame Eleanor's sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Eleanor, it's Eliza. Brendan is here. He's outside the house with someone. They have a metal detector. They're investigating the room. They know there's something." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. "Don't go out. Lock all the doors. I'm coming over right now, and I'm bringing help." The line cut off. Eliza hung up the phone with trembling hands and ran to check that all the doors were locked. Then she went to her children's rooms. Liam was awake, sitting in bed with scared eyes. "Mum, I heard noises outside." "I know, darling. Stay here with your brothers and sisters. Don't come out for anything. Understood?" Liam nodded, but Eliza saw the fear in his eyes. He was so young still, too young to have to live with these kinds of threats. She returned to the lounge just as she heard the bang on the front door. Loud, authoritative, nothing friendly. "Eliza, open the door. I know you're awake." It was Brendan's voice, but there was something different about it. Now there was no pretense of courtesy, no masks, just pure rage and greed. "Get off my property or I'll call the police," Eliza shouted from the other side of the door. "Go ahead, call them. By the time they arrive, I'll have found what I'm looking for." Eliza heard footsteps moving away from the front door. She ran to the window and watched in horror as Brendan and the man in black headed toward the back of the house toward the bolted room. Brendan was carrying something that looked like a heavy sledgehammer. They were going to break the wall. Eliza ran toward the hallway that led to the room. She pressed her back against the bolted door as if her body could stop what was coming. She heard the first blow of the sledgehammer against the exterior weatherboard, then the second, then the third. Each impact made the whole house shake. "Stop it!" she screamed with all the force in her lungs. "This is my property! What you're doing is illegal!" But the blows continued. The old wood began to give way. Eliza could hear the pieces falling to the ground outside. They were about to break a hole in the wall, about to see what was inside. Then, as an answer to a desperate prayer, she heard the sound of vehicles rapidly approaching on the dirt track. Many vehicles. She ran to the front window and saw 3 vehicles turning onto the property with their lights on. The first was Dame Eleanor's white Land Cruiser. The other 2 were police cars from the Wagga Wagga Municipal Police. Dame Eleanor got out of her vehicle, followed by 4 uniformed officers and a man in a suit Eliza recognized. Senior Sergeant Jones, the head of the local police. The hammering on the back wall stopped abruptly. Eliza ran out of the house and found Brendan and the man in black standing next to a hole the size of a football in the wall. Brendan still held the sledgehammer, His face was pale under the police torches. "Officer, arrest these men," Eliza cried, pointing at them with a trembling finger. "They're destroying my property." Senior Sergeant Jones approached with a severe expression. He looked at the hole in the wall, then at Brendan, then at the man in black who was trying to retreat into the shadows. "Brendan Kingsley," the sergeant said in a voice that admitted no argument. "You are under arrest for destruction of private property and breaking and entering. You have the right to—" "Wait," Brendan interrupted, his voice desperate. "You don't understand. This woman has something that belongs to my family. My aunt gave it to her illegally. There's a fortune hidden in that house." "A fortune, you say?" Senior Sergeant Jones asked with a skeptical tone. "What kind of fortune?" Brendan pointed toward the hole in the wall. "In there! The metal detector confirmed it. There's gold, silver, valuable objects. My grandfather hid them there decades ago, and now this woman—" "What's in that house?" Dame Eleanor's firm voice interrupted as she approached the group. "Is legally the property of Eliza O'Connell. The deeds we signed explicitly include the full contents of the property. Anything inside that house is hers by legal right." "But aunt, that was the family inheritance. You can't just give it to a stranger." "I can do whatever I want with my properties, Brendan." "And I did." Dame Eleanor turned to the sergeant. "I have certified copies of the deeds here. Everything was done legally before a solicitor. This woman saved my grandson's life. I gave her the house and all its contents as a sign of gratitude. My nephew has no legal right to any of this." The sergeant reviewed the documents Dame Eleanor handed him. Then he looked at Brendan with disgust. "Mr. Kingsley, the documents are in order. You have no claim on this property or its contents. What you did tonight constitutes a serious criminal offense." He signaled to his officers. "Arrest him." "No, wait!" Brendan yelled as the officers approached. "I can pay you." "I can—" But the handcuffs were already on his wrists. The man in black was also arrested. They led them toward the police cars while Brendan shouted threats and curses that were lost in the night. When the police cars drove away with their prisoners, only silence remained. Eliza sank onto the damp grass, trembling from head to toe. Everything had happened so fast. Everything had been so close to disaster. Dame Eleanor knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "It's over, Eliza. It's finished. You're safe. And if he comes back, what if he hires more people?" "He won't come back," Dame Eleanor said with absolute certainty. "Senior Sergeant Jones owes me a few favors. Brendan will spend at least a month in jail for this, and when he gets out, he'll have a restraining order preventing him from coming within 500 meters of this property." Besides, a small smile appeared on her tired face. "I'm talking to my solicitor tomorrow. I'm changing my will. Everything I own, my entire fortune, will go to charitable institutions when I die. Brendan and Chloe will be too busy fighting my will to bother you." Eliza looked at the millionaire with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Because you are the daughter I never had. Because I saw something in you that I lost a long time ago. Genuine kindness in a world full of greed." Dame Eleanor wiped Eliza's tears with her handkerchief. "And because my grandfather, Cornelio, would have wanted his fortune to go to someone who would use it for good, someone like you." The following days were a transition. Bluey finished the repairs to the house, including the hole Brendan had made in the wall. The Skew-Whiff house, now reinforced and beautiful, became the envy of the neighborhood. Eliza, advised by Dame Eleanor, began selling pieces of the treasure with great prudence. A necklace here, a painting there, always through Alistair Vance, always with absolute discretion. She never sold enough to attract attention, but enough to transform her family's life. First, she bought a larger house in Vaga, near the best schools. She kept the Skew-Whiff house as an investment property, renting it to a young family who filled it with laughter and life. The secret room was carefully emptied, and its contents were moved to a safe deposit box in Sydney, where only Eliza and Dame Eleanor had access. Liam began private tutoring with the best teachers and showed a surprising talent for mathematics. The twins, Jed and Finn, signed up for a local football program that discovered their natural abilities as players. Ruby started piano lessons and filled the new house with music. Pip joined a dance group and shone in every performance. And little Oscar, now 3, attended a preschool where he learned and grew up surrounded by other children. Eliza, for the first time in her life, had time to breathe, to think, to dream. She took night classes to finish her secondary education, which she had abandoned when she married Darren. She discovered she loved to read. She discovered she was intelligent, capable, much more than anyone had ever told her. And Dame Eleanor became a constant presence in their lives. She had dinner with them at least twice a week, She attended the twins' football games. She listened to Ruby play the piano. She read stories to Pip and Oscar. She had become the grandmother the children had never had. 6 months after Brendan's arrest, Eliza was in the kitchen of her new house, preparing a roast for a family dinner when the doorbell rang. She opened the door and found Julian Kingsley, Dame Eleanor's son, standing on the threshold with his wife Tara and son Leo. "Eliza," Julian said in a humble voice, "I know we don't know each other well. I know I haven't been the best son to my mother, but she talks about you all the time, about your children, about how you saved my son." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to thank you personally and apologize for not having done so sooner." Leo, now 6, hid behind his father's legs, shyly. But when he saw Eliza, his eyes lit up. "You're the lady who saved me from the billabong." Eliza knelt down to his height and smiled. "Hello, Leo. How have you been?" "Good. Dad says you're a hero. He says without you I'd be." The boy didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes filled with tears. Eliza hugged him gently. "You're fine. That's all that matters." That night, dinner was noisy and chaotic and perfect. Eliza's children and Leo played in the garden. Julian and Tara talked with Dame Eleanor about moving back to Wagga to be closer to her. Eliza watched the scene from the kitchen, her heart so full she thought it would burst. "What are you thinking about?" Dame Eleanor asked, appearing next to her with 2 cups of tea. "I'm thinking about Darren," Eliza said with honesty. "I wish he were here to see this, to see our children happy, healthy, with a future, to know that everything worked out in the end." "He knows," Dame Eleanor said softly. "Wherever he is, he knows, and he's proud of you." A year after receiving the Skew Whiff house, Eliza was sitting on the porch of her original home one Sunday afternoon. The house had been completely restored, and the family renting it now cared for it lovingly. Eliza came to visit occasionally, just to remember. Dame Eleanor arrived in her white Land Cruiser and sat next to her on the repaired stairs. "Do you know what my grandfather Cornelio told me before he died?" the millionaire suddenly asked. "I was 12 years old. He was very ill in bed, but he took my hand and said, 'Eleanor, money is just paper and metal. What matters is what you do with it. Use it to protect those who deserve it, to give opportunities to those with good hearts but bad luck. That's the only way money has true value.'" Dame Eleanor looked at Eliza with tears in her gray eyes. "For decades, I didn't understand what he meant. I kept his fortune hidden in that room, afraid it would fall into the wrong hands. But when I saw you jump into that billabong without thinking, when I saw your pure heart and your courage, I finally understood what my grandfather meant. You are the reason he stored that fortune. You are the person who deserved to find it." Eliza couldn't speak. She just hugged Dame Eleanor and cried tears of gratitude, relief, and pure happiness. 3 years later, Liam was accepted into the Australian National University, ANU, with a full scholarship to study engineering. The twins played in the junior teams for a professional AFL Australian Football League club. Ruby gave piano recitals in the city. Pip won a state dance competition. And Oscar, now 5, read books that children 7 could barely understand. Eliza had finished her high school certificate and was studying business administration at the local university. She had opened a small foundation that helped widows in situations similar to hers. She gave them work, training, emotional support. She had called it the Cornelio Kingsley Fund, in honor of Dame Eleanor's grandfather, and the Skew Whiff house, that tilted structure that once looked ready to collapse, had become a legend in Wagga. People told the story of the poor widow who had received a house that looked cursed but hid a miracle. A house that tilted not because of a curse, but because of the weight of love and generosity of a man who had stored his fortune for the right person, a person who was not of his blood, but who had proven to have the heart he always valued. Humble, brave, kind. 5 years after that night, Eliza had seen her husband die in the workshop. She stood in front of the Skew Whiff house with her 6 children, all dressed elegantly. Dame Eleanor was next to her, now 65 but still strong and dignified. "Mum," Liam said, now 19 and taller than her. "Are you ready?" Eliza looked at the house one last time. The house that had been tilted by the weight of a secret. The house that had given her a second chance. The house that had changed her life and her children's forever. "Yes," she said in a firm voice. "I'm ready." Because that afternoon, Eliza O'Connell was going to do something she had never imagined possible. She was going to Liam's university graduation ceremony. She was going to see her son, the son of the dead carpenter and the poor widow, receive his engineering degree. And then they would go to dinner at a fancy restaurant, all 8 of them together, celebrating not only the graduation, but the entire journey they had traveled. A journey that had begun with a tragedy, continued with humiliations and poverty, but had found redemption in the simplest and most profound act: kindness. The kindness of saving a life without asking for anything in return. The kindness of recognizing that goodness and rewarding it. The kindness that multiplies and expands like ripples in water, touching lives, transforming destinies, creating miracles. As they walked toward the new car Eliza had bought with money honestly earned from her work and prudent investments, Oscar took her hand. "Mum, is it true we were once poor?" Eliza knelt next to her youngest son and stroked his hair. "Yes, my darling. Once we were poor, but we were never miserable, because we always had love. And now we have love and opportunities too. But the important thing, what you must never forget, is that love came first." "And the skew whiff house?" the boy asked curiously. "Why was it crooked?" Eliza smiled, looking toward the tilted structure that now shone in the afternoon sun. "Because sometimes the most valuable things in life are so heavy, so important, that they make everything around them tilt a little. But that doesn't mean they're broken. It just means they're full of history, of love, of secrets waiting to be discovered by the right person." "And you were the right person?" "They say so," Eliza replied, hugging her son. "But I think the right person is simply someone who is willing to do the right thing when no one else will. Someone who protects what they love with their life, because in the end, what you protect with your life protects you." And as the car drove away down the dirt track, leaving behind the skew whiff house that had changed their lives forever, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that everything had been worth it, every tear, every humiliation, every moment of fear and doubt. Because in the end, goodness always finds its reward. Not always when we expect it, not always as we imagine it, but always. Eventually, life gives back what you give. And she had given everything she had: her work, her dignity, her courage. And life had given her back a miracle hidden in a tilted house, patiently waiting for the right person to open the door and discover that the greatest treasures are not those that gleam with gold and silver. They are the ones built with love, protected with bravery, and shared with a generous heart that never forgets where it came from or whom it owes thanks.